Good morning. This is Erica with Launching Legacies. Welcome to our daily devotional. Today we're going to talk about the fourth part of our series, The Reluctant Servant. So today we're going to talk about what happens from Exodus 5. Now remember, we left off Moses has decided that he needs his brother Aaron in order to do what God has told him to do. And God felt a certain way about it. The scripture says that God's anger was turned towards Moses in this area because God's like, didn't I make the tongue? Didn't I put words in your mouth? I'm the one who's going to send you through this place. And that was our reflection point, was to think about what it is that God is telling us that he is empowering us to do. And he doesn't want us to worry about where we feel insecure or we feel like inadequate. So now what happens next? So here, Moses and his brother Aaron, they get together. And in the 5th chapter of Exodus, they go to Pharaoh. And they do exactly what God tells them to do. They say, okay, Pharaoh, let our people go. We want to go celebrate in the desert for a few days. Let's do it. And what did you think they get in response? Well, if you can't guess, Pharaoh's like, no, absolutely not. We're talking about so many people. We're talking about this whole labor force in Egypt. Pharaoh's like, no, we're not. No, I'm not. I'm not letting them go. As a matter of fact, I'm insulted because you keep asking and demanding and telling me what's about to happen. And what happens is Pharaoh says, I'm going to increase it. So he increases the labor of the Egyptians of the Hebrews, excuse me. And then what happens as he increases the labor of the Hebrews, there becomes an issue of insolence between the Hebrews and Moses and Aaron, because now they're upset. They're like, you know what? At the end of this day, at the end of it, we were better off before you came. You're talking about God's going to save us. You're talking about he's going to set us free. But now our labor is so heavy and so much on us because now they had to make the bricks without straw. And so he's like, you made this so much worse for us that I feel a certain way about it. Right. And so the Hebrews are like looking at Moses and Aaron. They're like, thank you, but you made this worse. Like in a very sarcastic way, they're not happy about what's happening. And Moses gets to a breaking point again. And at that same point, he says almost the exact same thing that he said before. He said, listen, I am not the person to do this. They're not going to listen to me. Look, I'm not the one to speak these words. I'm not the one that you're supposed to have sent. And so he's again complaining to God. He's like, look, I can't do it. Right. And that's at the end of the chapter 6 of Exodus. He's saying that. He says, look, I am unskilled, inept in speech. How then will Pharaoh listen to me and pay attention to what I say? And that's what Moses is asking God. Well, of course, God sends a response. And he already knows that Pharaoh's going to be this way, right? And when he sends Moses, he already knows that Pharaoh's not going to receive him and that things are going to have to amp up a few more notches before the children of Israel will be let go. But he still sent Moses with the intention of trying his best and doing his best work in this situation, and so that he could see the power of God. All right, so now what happens next? Here we are. It's not working, and then the miracles come, right? And so we know what's going to happen is there's going to be 10 plagues on Egypt. What you might not know about these plagues, though, and why they're significant and important in this place is, for one, there was the plague of the hand, right? So he puts the hand, and we already knew that was going to happen because he said that. So he puts his hand in his cloak and removes it, and it has a plague, and then he comes off, and he doesn't have leprosy anymore. That's the one that we knew was going to happen. The next one that we knew was going to happen was the staff, right? You throw the staff down. Aaron actually does it. It turns into a snake, and he picks it up, and it's a staff again. Okay, so we know these things are going to happen. But what about the next 10 plagues? Because those are quite interesting. So the first is that he turns the water into blood. And what you may not know is that water in the Egyptian culture at this time represented a deity, and that deity is Hapi, right? And so what it represents is this is their deity of water. So they worship this God. So the God of the Hebrews is judging the Egyptian gods in every one of the 10 plagues. And so what is he saying to Moses, and he's saying to the Hebrews, and he's saying to the Egyptians, because this message is trifold, right? He's not just saying it to the Egyptians, this judgment that he's putting on them, the 10 plagues. He's also saying it to Moses, and he's saying it to the children of Israel. Look, I am the God Most High. He said, I am who I am, and I get to punish whatever lesser thing than than me, I choose to punish. So they want to worship water in this sense, then I'm going to judge the water. And so the water turns to blood, and that's Hapi. The Egyptian god Hapi is judged in that place. And then the next plague that comes is that the frogs come, right? And they cover the land. The frogs are everywhere. And what that judgment is the judgment against the god Heket. And so this is, again, another Egyptian god of fertility and water and movement and all that kind of stuff that is symbolized through the frog. And so they're judging Heket. They're like, God is like, I'm not gonna let this God reign above me. And he's saying to Moses, listen, every time I pronounce a judgment, every time I pronounce a plague, I'm not doing this because I'm sadistic and I want people to be punished, but I want them to understand that I am God Most High. And if I say something, I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. And so in every opportunity, of course, the Pharaoh has the opportunity to let his people go. And we know that he doesn't in any of these choices, but the plagues continue. So the third plague is the gnats and the insects. Okay. And this is the god of Geb that's being brought forth here. And then there's also a god of Kefri. Okay, that's a part of this. And what is this saying? That look at these gods are not going to reign above me again. So God puts that plague in. And then the next plague is the plague over the cattle, and that is Hathor is the name of the god that they would worship for the cows. And so Hathor is kind of like the word heifer that we use, but that is another of their deities, and so that god gets judged. The next plague is the plague of the boils, and boils represent a bad skin or unwellness, not being healthy, not being beautiful. And so the god that they're judging here is Isis. So God is judging Isis, the queen. It's a goddess, Isis, in the area of giving the boils to the people. And then the next thing that happens is that the crops are destroyed by hail. And so this is the god of the sky that God is judging, and that God's name is Nut. So here now God is sending this plague, which is Nut, and that's the 8th plague. The 9th plague is the plague with the locust, and that is against the god of chaos and disorder, which is Seth. And then the last plague that comes is darkness. Not the last plague. That was the 7th plague with Seth. 9th plague, is darkness against the sun god, which is Ra. And then the last plague that comes, that hits the Egyptians, is the plague against Pharaoh, which is the God Most High in the Egyptian culture. And so what they're doing is he's judging the most powerful God. Because Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go, because he refused to let the Hebrews go, God's judgment increased for every god that the Egyptians worshipped, and they had hundreds of gods, so this is just 10 of them of their major gods that they worship. God sent a plague to say, you are not God, you are not God, you are not ruling, you are not reigning, you are not above me, you are not higher than me, you are not more powerful than me. I encourage you to study these passages because it gets us to Exodus, the 10th chapter. At the end, the last plague is the 11th chapter of Exodus. So we get to Exodus 11, we've seen that God has used these 10 plagues in order to judge the Egyptians. But he's also sending a message to the Hebrews, and he's also sending a message to Moses. And that's what I want to focus on. If you want to know about these gods and why they might have been judged, you should read these passages in Exodus. But in addition to that, you should understand that when God makes a statement like this, when he decides that he's going to judge a lesser god, he's saying to everyone who can see what's happening, he's saying a clear message. Do not think that I am lesser or less powerful than I am, and that I will be put into a position in which my glory will be given to someone else or something else. It's not going to happen. God is saying, I am God Most High. I am that I am. I am never changing. Pharaoh doesn't reign over me, or any of these other lesser gods. They don't reign over me. I'm going to do what I want to do. And that's a powerful statement for us if we're thinking about what we're going to do for God. Are we allowing God to be God Most High? Or do we have lesser gods like the Egyptians did that need to be judged? Or do we have lesser things that are less important, like Moses and Aaron and the Hebrews do, that need to be judged in our presence so that we can understand how powerful our God really is? We should not doubt the power of an almighty God. But when we do, Oftentimes, God sets it right for us. But do we need that? That's the challenge for us. Do we need that? Do we need to see things be judged so that we can know who's really powerful? Or can we just choose to believe that we are serving the God Most High, and He is powerful, and He is loving, and He is kind, and He is generous, and He is everything we need? That's our challenge, right? I'm going to be praying for you. I hope that you'll be praying for me. But I want to encourage you to think about this. As we're serving God, do we really adore Him as the Most High? Or are there other things that we're putting in place to draw our attention away, or to make us feel comfortable, or to make us feel like we're whole in other places? It's important that they saw this judgment come against these gods, because they needed to understand, Moses in particular needed to understand who God was and what He was capable of doing. He's capable of doing the same things for you. He will protect you. He will rescue you. He will take you out of the circumstance. He will help you to be in the circumstance and be strong and well. He'll do mighty works for us. But we got to trust Him. I'll see you again tomorrow for the next day's devotional of the reluctant servant. But in the meantime, I want to encourage you to study this passage in Exodus and look at the correspondence to the Egyptian gods. It's quite interesting, but it's also very powerful, and it should speak something to you. And I hope it does. Until tomorrow, be blessed.